Hello, and welcome to day 2 of our 5-day webinar series called Life Made Accessible, Accessing the Future, in honor of National Accessibility Week, which takes place from May 31st to June 4th. Our event is an opportunity to see into the lives being presented to you. We hope it will give better understanding of the paths that some individuals with disabilities need to take. With understanding, we hope it will lead to a world more accessible. My name is Sherry Roberts, and I work for the Independent Living Center as a Community Resource Coordinator. And today I am your host. For today's webinar, we will look at allyship in the community. But before we begin, just a few points. The spirit of this event is an opportunity for learning. Our panelists will be sharing personal experiences and perspectives. This is their story. They do not speak on behalf of all individuals living with a disability. We encourage you to comment and ask questions to our panelists throughout the webinar using the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. The last 10 to 15 minutes of our time together will be dedicated to answering your questions. Please remember to be appropriate and courteous. We are pleased to provide both CART transcription and interpretation services for today's webinar. To enable closed captioning, click on the closed caption button on the bottom of your Zoom window and then choose subtitles. Just a reminder to please speak slowly and clearly so that our interpreters can capture all of your messages. To begin, I would like to introduce our moderator for today, Carmen Sutherland. Carmen has lived in both Canada and the United States. She did her undergraduate and graduate studies in Illinois, where she got to live in a dormitory specifically for people with physical disabilities. There, she learned to take pride in her identity as a woman with a disability. She has a background in rehabilitation counseling and loves to build community for everyone, especially people with disabilities. She is the community relations person for Bridges to Belonging and has been since January of 2016. She lives independently in the community with lots of help from her personal support worker friends who help her live a full and flexible life, which include both work and fun. She loves getting to know, eating good food, and watching TV. Over to you, Carmen.
Thank you, Sherry, and welcome everyone. I look forward to our discussion. What does it mean to be a good ally to people with the diverse needs in your community? Today, we will learn about the power of allyship from the perspective of people with lived experience of disability and intersectional identities, as well as allies who are passionate about building equitable community. Before we dive into this topic, I would like to introduce you to our guests. First, we have Bernard Aquedo. Bernard Aquedo de Bacna is a first-generation Black man of West African descent who was diagnosed with the eye condition of retinitis pigmentosa at 2 years old. He is currently working as a student support counselor at a school for the blind and partially sighted in Brantford. He has completed his social service work diploma, Bachelor of Social Work degree, and is currently completing his Master's of Social Work degree. He is a CNIB and Fighting Blindness Canada advocate and ambassador, part of a group called Black Voices United, member of OPSUE Coalition for Racialized Workers, a member of Dean Support Advocacy Group, a member of the University of Waterloo Masters of Social Worker Committee, as well as other groups. As a racialized person who lives with a disability, allyship is a huge sector in breaking down marginalization. He believes it is important to have allies to help you spawn a difference. He considers allyship as a collaboration with someone who may not be part of the community, but is passionate to create change. Bernard firmly believes that a good ally is willing to listen and let the oppressed demographic be heard. Then we have Keenan O'Donoghue. Keenan is a 24-year-old man with cerebral palsy. His disability is only physical, and he uses a wheelchair, but has excellent hand-eye coordination and motor function. Right now, he is attending Wilfrid Laurier University, majoring in communication and cultural studies with a minor in marketing. Currently, he lives at home, but he plans to live in an independent living center apartment very soon and hopefully buy a house once his career gets started. Jess Gilbert is part of Bridges to Belonging community as an independent facilitator. She was born and raised in Waterloo, Ontario, where she currently attends the University of Waterloo and is in her third year of psychology and religious studies. In her spare time, she enjoys mediating, yoga, singing, playing the ukulele, and crafting. She is an ally and feels passionate about allyship because equality is extremely important, and she believes there is also great merit in listening to others' perspectives. She believes that being an ally means being willing to act with and for others in pursuit of ending oppression and creating equality. She believes that every individual needs to understand what this means in order for society to move towards universal equality. Welcome and thank you for being here, everyone. So let's start with, what does allyship mean to all of you, and why do you think it is important? Let's start with Keenan.
Before we get started, I'm just going to remind everyone that we need to speak nice and slowly, just at a moderate pace, so our interpreters can keep up with all of our great insight. Thank you.
Okay, my apologies. Keenan, would you like to go ahead?
For sure. So allyship to me means listening. Listening is one of the most important functions we have as human beings. This is why we are given 2 ears and a single mouth. If people stopped to listen more people would understand just what one person needs and then be able to apply what they've listened to that person. Also, it is important to be genuine. As a person with disability, I found it very important in my life to really seek out those who I find are genuinely people who want to help me. Oftentimes, people want to help for a very different reasons. Sometimes, unfortunately, people want to help just to feel good about themselves. I have several tricks, not so much tricks, but several things I do to kind of weigh the balance and see if a person is really willing to be an ally to me or is there for other reasons. One of the simple ones I do is I time roughly in my head how long the person takes to stop talking about themselves. It seems kind of silly at first, but when you think about it, if a person speaks a lot just about themselves and only thinks of themselves first, generally an allyship with that person is not going to be successful.
Thank you so much, Keenan. Jess, would you like to go second?
For sure. So allyship to me means taking the time to really get to know somebody and understand them. In my opinion, allyship is important because, especially for people living with disabilities, a lot of individuals are told what to do or how to live their life. A lot of people aren't really used to being deeply understood. They may be used to some sort of surface level understanding, but not a really deep level of understanding. And especially in this day and age, with connections being a little harder to foster because of everything being online, I think it's especially important to take the time to get to know and understand those people that are in our lives. And we can do this by asking questions, enjoying the activities that they like to do with them, encouraging them and being their support. Allyship is really important to gain that connection and to keep fostering relationships with people. In this way, individuals are able to feel valued and understood.
Thank you so much, Jess. Ben, would you like to offer your perspective?
Yes. So wonderful examples by both Jess and Keenan. Fantastic. For myself, allyship is so important when it comes to the disability community, because as a community and as a movement to fight for equality and social justice, it's very important to know that as a partnership, you need someone to not talk for you, not talk about you, but talk with you. So it's just very important to know that even though that individual is not in that community, they are willing to walk alongside of you and not stand in front or push you from behind, but give you that opportunity, that equal opportunity to express yourself. And as Keenan highlighted upon, the fact that the individual is willing to listen and not just do all the talking, but willing to listen about your experiences and willing to listen on what they can do to assist you, even though, as I mentioned, they do not occupy that community. So that's pretty much what comes to my mind when I think about allyship, especially with a disability.
Thank you so much, Ben. Next, perhaps we can talk about some misconceptions that people might have about allyship. Ben, do you want to talk about your thoughts about misconceptions?
Of course, of course. Thank you. So misconception of allyship that I feel that's around is when people are loud about a certain aspect. So it doesn't matter on how loud they are or how much are they pushing for the aspect. It has to be where that person is immersed in that movement or in uh, that community. So not just going out and having hashtags and going on your social media and saying, I believe in this, or I went to the rally and I'm the loudest person, or I'm always like pushing for it, to actually understand the community you're a part of. So within disabilities, as I mentioned before, instead of like talking for someone and saying, this is how it is and this is how it should be, you should know that the person could talk for themselves and that person could express themselves. You're just a support system. So definitely misconceptions that must be extinguished is the fact that it doesn't matter how loud you are, as long as you're immersed with the community. That's the most important aspect of being a wonderful ally. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Ben. Keenan, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
For sure, I can go actually right off Ben's point. It works nicely. So my misconception that comes to mind for myself is that people always need help. Yes, it's true that sometimes people do need help from others for things they can't do themselves, especially when they have a disability. But oftentimes what the help isn't obvious. So an ally might try to physically help a person with a disability, but sometimes they need emotional support or just someone to bounce ideas off of. And if the ally is always working to solve a problem for a person with a disability, it can take away from their own independence in trying to figure it out. This go back this goes back to the idea I talked about before about bouncing ideas off of. Oftentimes, if I need help with something, I'd like to first ask, is there anything of this problem I can do myself? If if the person trying to help me just jumps in and takes control of the situation, that's not true allyship. You have to ask how somebody needs help and not just assume you know the best way how to help them.
Thank you. Jess, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I actually have a great point that runs right off of that. So I myself, I'm a big problem solver, and one of the big challenges that I had to overcome within my strive for allyship is not always not always being the problem solver. So I always want to be the one who solves all of the problems and has all of the answers. However, it was really important for me to learn that it's more important to be there for others while they're making their own decisions, and most importantly, let them make the decision that they want to do in the way that they want to do it. So I learned that the most beneficial thing that I can do in these types of situations is to ensure that the person that I'm walking with has all of the necessary information to make their best decision. And then I just support them wherever I can. I recognize that I'm not the person who's supposed to make that decision for them, but I'm just supposed to walk alongside them and not tell them what to do or how to live their life. And another big misconception that kind of runs off of Ben's point is kind of the belief, a lot of people might believe that awareness is enough for something, and all they just need to know is kind of the logistics about a situation. But I think that allyship just isn't just about recognizing power differences, but it's also about taking action to affect change that serves to right injustices. So this includes using your voice to educating others and getting to know the perspective of people who are living with that injustice, and using resources to support and advocate for others. And kind of like how Ben was mentioning, or how Keenan was mentioning, not just listening to respond, but actually listening to understand somebody and walk with them, and not talk for them, but just walk alongside them.
Thank you so much, Jess. I know another thing we really wanted to touch on is the idea of intersectionality, and I'm going to start with Ben on that subject. Would you go ahead, Ben?
Of course, of course. So intersectionality, I feel like that embodies exactly who I am as a person living with a disability, specifically partially sighted as a Black male. And I feel that it's very important to incorporate the idea of intersectionality, because if you cease in doing so, it really puts a person into a bubble. So with that said, what it does, it really takes away from allyship when you don't actually truly understand that person's situation. So even as to my point before on being fully immersed, you can't go halfway within allyship. And when intersectionality is a portion, it's important to take all those different intersections, all those different aspects and facets, and actually have a true understanding of what that person's going through and the movement and the change that that person is looking to do so. So it's very good to consider, because no one person's experience is always the same. So thank you for that question.
No problem. Thank you for answering it. Keenan, did you have something you wanted to add?
Absolutely. I think for myself, intersectionality is all about who I am. And yes, I do have a physical disability, but in terms of how I identify myself, that would be near the bottom of my list. First would be the fact that I'm a huge family person and I like to take care of others. And that's another misconception about people with disabilities. There's a misconception around them always needing to be the ones to be taken care of. I enjoy taking care of people just as much as they take care of me. Another real big aspect of intersectionality for me growing up was sports. Oftentimes my friends at school, they had hockey or they had soccer or they had something to go to get that real sense of team camaraderie that's really important in a child's development. I didn't have that very much growing up until I found the Junior Spinners program, which is a junior basketball program in Kitchener. And I was there for almost 8 years, and it was less so about the basketball, and it was more so about having teammates that looked like me, that knew the struggles I would go through, and that it was just talked about not in a poor you or a faux pas sort of way, but just as regular day conversation. So that was a big aspect for me. And then I moved on to wheelchair rugby, and that led to a whole different understanding of what a team was, because we got to travel, we got to play games, we got to know each other really well, and it was almost like it was just a coincidence we all had disabilities because we just got together. We were such a team together.
That's so great, Keenan. I love hearing about that. Okay. The next thing I thought we thought we could touch on is we wanted to talk about some good experiences of allyship that people have had. So I think, Jess, maybe we'll start with you, and maybe we'll especially talk about that person that you walk with that you were telling us about.
For sure. So I've had tons of good experiences with allyship within my work. So, and especially even within my friendships and within my walking life. So one of the people that I walk with actually has a friend who's a great ally. She's always asking about her experience and always trying to educate herself. The individual that I walk with feels that it's very important for people to get to know them and ask questions and understand where they're coming from. And since they've mentioned their friend doing this, they feel so much better about themselves, and they feel happy knowing that people are eager to get to know them and understand them, and they feel heard. And another great ally that comes to mind is my aunt, and she's always doing her research and asking lots of questions directly to people to learn about their experience and how they experience things. And she's also very involved within the community. She does everything that she can to support my cousin who's living with a disability, and she tries her very best to not take away his voice and let him make his own decisions in life. And this definitely helps him feel valued and understood.
Wonderful. Ben, did you want to go next?
Yes, so I had some really wonderful experiences when it did come to allyship. One top experience that does come to mind is even in the workplace and family and friends, because as Keenan was mentioning earlier, as a person living with a disability, there are things that you are unable to do. So I have some great like friends and family members and coworkers who, if it's any time that I need groceries, they will go out anytime, take me along, and not make me feel that I'm asking of too much or I am hindering them, and understanding where I'm coming from. So things like that, and even the treatment where if we are at a retail store or a grocery store and I am talking to the cashier or associate, they will step back and let me speak. And I think that's something that's so powerful. And even as Jess was saying, it is something that empowers the person living with a disability because you are getting the opportunity to speak for yourself. You don't have to pull that looking around. Are they talking to me? No, of course they're talking to me because I am that person. So that's where some great experiences on allyship. And even for me as a person who lives with a disability, that taught me how to be a good ally for other people with disabilities or other oppressed demographics as well.
That's really great, Ben. Thank you for sharing. Keenan, did you want to add?
Or I'll add on to that a little bit. So some of the biggest allies in my life are a part of my immediate family, but I'm not going to focus on them because I think the more profound impacts of allies have come outside of my own blood relatives. For example, I have a best friend that I've had since I was 5 years old, and I can't seem to think of a time where my disability was ever brought up in conversation in any sort of way. I always just felt like another person. And when talking with a group with that friend of mine, I get treated just like any other young guy. So that was really cool. And in terms of a kind of unique experience of allyship, I would say my student summer positions at ILC were a pretty unique allyship for me. It represented my first non-volunteer job that I actually got to go out every day and be independent and make contributions to to a group who already supported people with disabilities, which was pretty cool.
Keenan, that's really great. Um, so now maybe we'll talk about who can be an ally. Like who's able to be an ally. So maybe Jess, we will start with you on this one.
Awesome.
Yes, go ahead.
Perfect. Great question. So anyone is able to be an ally. So really what it's all about is gaining those connections and taking the time to understand somebody and their experience. It's all about taking the time to develop the relationship and deepen that connection. One thing that I think is super important to being an ally is genuine understanding. My advice for people struggling with allyship is to go on into conversations with a motivation of curiosity. Don't go into things but with a helping mentality, but a curiosity mentality. This is something that my boss actually suggested to me, and I haven't forgotten it since. Going into things with this mentality has indefinitely helped me deepen my connections and foster allyship. It is also really important that you're able to walk alongside a person and not do things for them, but with them. As an example of this, sometimes the people that I walk with want assistance from something that I see is an unhealthy choice. Even though I don't and feel entirely comfortable, I had to ensure that I don't take away people's voice. I recognize that I can't make decisions on behalf of others. Instead, I must walk alongside them in being their advocate. Instead of making decisions for them, I ensure that they have all of the information available, and we discuss the potential pros of a decision and have a long discussion about the potential consequences. Without me making any sort of decision for them, they are usually able to come up with on their own an educated and informed choice. This is a great example of how the people that we walk with do not always make decisions that align with our own values. In these times, it is important to recognize that people do not always have the same values as us. Although that does not mean we can't have an open discussion about our opinion, it just means that we must ensure we do not take the person's voice away, and we recognize that they are capable of making their own life decisions. All we can do is really make sure that they have all of the information available and let them make their final choice.
Thank you, Jess. Keenan, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
I think you're muted, Keenan.
Thanks, Jess.
No problem.
Pardon me. So I was just saying that was really well said. And one thing I would say that's really important is to educate yourself. But like Jess said, approach it with a curiosity and not this is what it is and then I'm going to go into it. If you educate yourself about how to just remain open to the possibility that you might need to help this person, you might need to just be their friend, you might need to be this, you might need to be that, and not immediately go into I need to help this person because they're an disability or because they're struggling, because that kind of mindset can really close off the possibilities of a relationship with that person, and it kind of cuts down that connection that you're trying to build in order to be a really true ally to that person.
Great. I thought then next we can talk about what are some things that are unique to being an ally of a person with a disability specifically. Ben, did you want to start with that one perhaps?
So a benefit I would say is to get to have the ability to get to know someone in a unique position, because even with us as individuals who live with disabilities, we're against the social norm. We're against a normal social construct. So I think it's really awesome as a person with a disability. You almost build that resiliency, you build that innovation, you build that adaptability. So for someone who does not live with a disability, having the opportunity to actually get to know someone who has that resiliency, who has that compassion, who has that empathy of living with a disability, where you're more empathetic to others. So it's almost where you're able to open up a whole new world to just life in general.
Awesome. Keenan?
Absolutely. So I think one of the most unique things about being an ally to a person with a disability is you have to make yourself vulnerable at first, because they are already vulnerable when you introduce yourself, because they have a disability and you're trying to help them. So this automatically puts a shift in your relationship. If you come into the relationship being vulnerable yourself, then it's not such a shift in the relationship, and you can actually start working together instead of on any other level. Another thing I would say too is you there's a misconception about having to adjust the speed you do things for the person with the disability. They are going to tell you what speed to do things. You do not need to start off super slow or start off super fast at things. Let them direct their care, or else it's just not going to work out. And it's important, specifically for allies with people with disabilities, to understand communication versus criticism. So oftentimes when a person with disability is asking for help and the person helping them isn't doing it quite right, sometimes that person with a disability can be in discomfort. So when they speak to you, it can sound harsh, but really all they're trying to do is communicate as effectively as possible in order to get what they need to get done. So it's that distinction between communication and criticism.
Thank you, Keenan. How can people move more towards acceptance as opposed to just tolerance? Ben, did you have something you wanted to say about that?
Yes, of course, of course. So it's very important to separate the meanings of tolerance and acceptance, because tolerance is you're okay with it. You could go to your workplace and someone living with a disability works there and you're all for it. But when it's someone who is perhaps a friend or someone within the community, how does your perceptions and does how you feel change? So it's important to challenge tolerance versus acceptance, because with allyship, we don't want people just to be tolerant and just to be like, oh, I'm on board for it halfway. We want people to, once again, use that word, learn, and be empathetic and be immersed into the movement. So it's very important to challenge yourself. If you're a person who's kind of leaning on tolerance, challenge those biases and values that you hold, because it's so important for something to truly move smoothly, for those who are allies to be accepted.
Wonderful. Keenan or Jess, did you have anything you wanted to add there, or did you want me to move on to the next question?
I think he covered it pretty well.
Okay. What about the impact of allyship, both on your individual lives and experiences and on the world? Shall we start with Keenan there?
Sure. So one of my biggest experiences that I haven't really talked about yet is my experiences as a student. And so oftentimes in classrooms, people with disabilities were separated when I was growing up. And I always didn't want that. I didn't want a higher desk. I didn't want to be in the back. I didn't want to be in the front. I just wanted to be. And so if you're able to find those special connections with teachers throughout your life, teachers can become not only essential role models, but essential kind of mentors on how to ask for accommodation correctly. I'll never forget. I had a grade 10 math teacher, and I had struggled in grade 9 math the year before, and I was so unconfident in my ability. And she went the extra mile to make sure I knew it was okay to ask for help all the time. And oftentimes when you're dealing with certain teachers, even if you have a disability, they'd rather you not ask for help. So it's about you finding those individuals that are accepting to your needs and accepting that you are able to ask them anything. And that's one of the biggest forms of allyship I've had from the ages of 9 till now.
Wonderful, Keenan. That's such a great story. Ben, did you have something you would like to add?
No, what? That was well said. That was awesome.
Great. Jess, anything, or are you good?
That was really well said. I'm more than happy to give an example of my own if you'd like.
Sure.
Awesome. So I actually went to high school with somebody who was living with a disability, and unfortunately, she did not have many allies growing up. Our high school was not very welcoming to her. A lot of, kids can be mean, and people weren't willing to be her ally other than a few people. And, since she's grown up, I've seen her start to foster more connections and gain more allies within our community and start to, really gain those connections. And she's just blossomed since she's done that. She's so much more confident in herself, and she's so much happier since she started gaining these connections and these allies within our community. And she actually has gained enough confidence to work her dream job. Now she works at an animal hospital, and I've never seen her happy. And it's because of this allyship that she was able to gain enough confidence to come out of her shell and understand what she wants to do, where she wants to apply her gifts and strengths. And then she finally gained enough courage to achieve her dream. And it's just so wonderful to see. The impact of allyship should never be underestimated.
That just made my whole day.
Right?
Yes. Maybe then the other thing I wanted to ask, particularly maybe of Ben and Keenan, is how have you been able to develop relationships and allyship with people of different that have different disabilities than your own? Ben, do you want to start?
Yes. So once again, it's that same process of for an able-bodied person to develop allyship for someone living with a disability. So even this past few months, I actually have a coworker who has a deaf husband, and I remember establishing such a great relationship with him. And there's a lot of misconceptions where it's like a blind guy friends with a deaf person, like what's going on there? That's never gonna work. He can't hear you, and you can't see him. But no, that's once again a misconception, because as an ally to that community, I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to adapt. I'm willing to find ways to make it work. And the same goes for my friend as well, where when you do support that community or you do support that demographic, you will make it work. You will listen, you will be empathetic, and you will learn ways, constructive criticism to get better, to become an ally. So it's just very important to, once again, same process for anybody else, just be willing to listen and be willing to learn.
That's great. Thank you for that, Ben. Keenan, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, to struggle is not universally for a person with disability. It's for everyone. Everybody can struggle. It doesn't matter your disability. It doesn't matter if you have a cognitive disability, physical disability, able body. Everybody struggles. And I think one of my experiences in just allying myself with other people with disabilities is from when I was in high school, and there was often a very obvious to me because I maybe have an eye for it or whatever. There was obvious disparity in treatment between able-bodied students and cognitive disability students. They would laugh, they would make fun and whatnot. So me and my friends, we created this program. I went to Resurrection High School, so it was called Friends of the Phoenix, and basically we would go to a special classroom during lunch, during the second half of our lunch, and we would just hang out and play games. And it wasn't to test them or anything. It was just to be there as friends of them. And, you know, I helped organize it a lot in my senior years, but the whole point is to, like I said earlier, get people who are genuinely there to help people and who want to be there, who don't want people who want to be there just so they can say, oh, I helped out this person with the disability. Those aren't the people. We want to make genuine connections with the students and not just see it as something good on me that I did that. And I still keep in contact with a number of those students. And you know, since leaving high school, there's been a kind of a sad drop off in terms of their connections because there's not a lot of programs they see them in, whether that's parents wanting to keep them separate from other students or wanting to keep them separate from other people. So I think it's something that more allyship can even address now.
Sure. Thanks for that, Keenan. I think that those are all the official questions that we thought we might want to cover today. Sherry, did we have questions from the audience? Sherry?
Hi, Carmen. Sherry seems to be away from her monitor at this second, but I do see there is a question that came in earlier. So it says, for anyone who would like to answer, it says, how do you discern between showing interest in someone and their lives versus being nosy and intruding into their lives? If a random person peppered me with personal questions, I would be offended. So I'm not sure who wants to speak to that, but
I guess I'll go. It's Ben. So what we another thing with allyship is building a rapport. So even like a friendship, when you first meet a friend, you're not going to be asking the friend like so many different questions like right away, like what school did you go to, what's your favorite color, what's your favorite TV show, maybe perhaps, but you wouldn't go too in depth when you're meeting someone. So I find with allyship, it is building that rapport and knowing the subject of what you're getting into, or the demographic. So you could definitely tell nosiness when you can visibly be uncomfortable, or even let them know that you're uncomfortable with the questions asked. So it's very important to understand that just because you're looking to be an ally, it doesn't mean it gives you the right to go and ask questions and pry into people's lives.
Thank you, Ben. Keenan, did you have something you wanted to add? I thought I saw you raise your hand.
I was gonna say what I usually tell people, because people ask me like, what do you do when you get approached with all these questions about your chair, about your service dog, about this, about that? I start asking questions about them, and that usually has either two things: either they will explain or they will back off because they're just being nosy. And another thing is, in order to not come across nosy, you really want to start simple. Like, I'm talking simple. what's your name? What are you doing here wherever you are? Because if you start asking them directly about a disability that they have, unless you're like a 6-year-old kid, which happens to me every other day, but just start slow, because you want to make sure you are asking the person and not the person with the disability.
Great. Any more questions, Sherry?
Yeah, there is a couple here. Sorry, I couldn't get my mic back on earlier. Thanks, Dan, for hopping in for me. So yeah, there's a couple questions here directly to Ben and Keenan. What are some specific ways your loved ones have been allies to you guys?
So perhaps we mean your family or your closest friends, I'm thinking maybe?
Yeah, I think so. Friends and family, yeah.
Yeah,
I can go if that's all right.
go ahead.
All right. So in high school, so let's say when I got to high school, grade nine's tough, right? It's tough to fit in. Everybody sticks out, and I stick out more than most. So my biggest thing was I had my one best friend, and I'm like, how are we gonna, do this together? And sometimes it happens naturally, but sometimes it doesn't. But you look for people that have the same value as you do. So what do we want? We want people that say what they mean, that have integrity, and integrity is hard to find, and it's hard to kind of suss out. But basically, you want people that don't talk behind your back. You want people who are straight up honest, can look you in the eye and ask an awkward question without giggling or feeling ashamed, because everybody wants to know questions about me. That's fine. I have no problem with that. But you're looking for people like that. And once I had an established group of friends, it took a while, it didn't happen overnight. But once I had an established group of friends in high school, you kind of know that you have protectors on your disability. And if anyone were to ever make fun of me, and it happens, they had my back, and that's a really cool relationship. And my parents and my sister are the exact same way. They'll never do something for me, but if I ask them to have my back, just like any other person, disability or not, they'll have my back. It's about being forthcoming with what you want, and then hopefully your family or your close friends have the integrity to back you up, and if they don't, you cut them loose.
Thank you, Keenan. Ben, would you like to add anything?
Of course, and wonderful description, Keenan. I could really relate to that as well. For myself, I think it is a process as well, because I know with my family members and friends, there were rocky roads where sometimes understanding wouldn't be the greatest, but it's definitely a process where when you start to prove to them that you're just like everybody else and you're doing things like everybody else in the accomplishments, that's when they they see you like everybody else. And I find that being a person at my age where I didn't grow up with social media, but I came with when it was developing, and I find like with what you call, not even just social media, but just multimedia and incorporating individuals with disabilities, I find that people are starting to really get that, oh, like being a person with a disability is not just a one-dimensional kind of thing. And people are actually starting to get like, yeah, they're just like myself. It's nothing different. So I think it's just awareness and just shining a spotlight onto like disabilities, to have the friends and family to have your back and such. So
Thank you. Any more questions, Sherry?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a couple more. So there's one for Jess. So how has your work as an independent facilitator changed your views of allyship?
And Jess, maybe before you answer that, you could just give like a nutshell description of your position so that people know what you're talking about.
That's exactly what I was thinking. So for those of you who aren't aware, as Carmen mentioned at the beginning of the talk, I work as an independent facilitator with this company called Bridges to Belonging. So as an independent facilitator, I walk alongside individuals in discovering their gifts and strengths and figuring out what they want to do in the community. And then I help them take active steps to get there. So walking alongside individuals helps assist them in identifying the life that they want in the community. As an independent facilitator, I listen deeply to help guide the process of visioning, planning, identifying community-based assets, relationship building, supporting network development, and goal achievement. My work as an independent facilitator has changed my views of allyships in more ways than I can ever imagine. I used to think that allyship was like friendship, and that if I was simply involved with someone or a group, that meant that I was their ally. I've come to learn that allyship is more than that and also involves taking an active role.
Sorry,
My
Jessica,
work-
can you slow down a little bit, please?
Oh,
Thank you.
yes, of course. My apologies. So my work is very centered around person-centered planning, which involves letting the person decide what they want to do while others assist them in helping achieve their dreams. Within facilitation, I walk alongside people in being their ally and helping them achieve what they want to in their life. From my understanding, a lot of individuals living with disabilities are told what they can do in their life and told where they can fit in. My work helps break those barriers in that I walk alongside others in identifying their goals, and I assist them wherever they need in helping them achieve their dreams.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yep.
Sherry, do we have time for one more question, or are we about to wrap up soon?
Nope, we have time for one more question.
Okay.
So we've got one here. At my volunteer job, most people assume that I need help by the way I look. How do I explain that I'll ask for help if I need it? So I wonder maybe Keenan or Ben could speak to that. Keenan, yeah, perfect.
Speak to that. Is my mic on? Yeah, my mic's on. Okay. So one of the biggest, and people are afraid to say it, but one of the biggest things in order to kind of get people to stop doing things for you like that and assuming is say no. Because people don't expect you to say no to them. And don't say it rudely, just say no. And then they kind of look up at you like, did you just say no to me? And you're like, yeah, I said no because I need this a certain way, and please don't look at me and just assume I need something. So the word no is actually one of the most powerful words because people are shocked to hear it in a public setting, but it gets people's attention. And that's what you need. You need that eye contact so then you can have a conversation. Getting upset about them doing it is not going to be as effective as getting their attention, and then they can stop once you explain.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Keenan. So we do have some more questions. Unfortunately, we can't get to each and every one. You guys have done such a great job that it's really been intriguing for people. They've wanted to ask you lots, but we're going to have to close out just due to time constraints. But I just wanted to thank everyone for your participation today. We'd like to invite all of you to join us for the remainder of the week by visiting the registration page on the City of Kitchener website. Tomorrow, we're going to take a look at the value of allyship at work. Thursday, our speakers will talk about how to communicate with accessibility in mind. And Friday, we're going to talk about the future of accessibility in technology. Many thanks to our organizing committee organizations, including the Independent Living Center of Waterloo Region, CNIB Foundation, CHS, Canadian Hearing Service, Community Support Connections, KW Accessibility, Bridges to Belonging, KW Habilitation, and the cities of Kitchener, Waterloo, and Cambridge, who contributed towards our closed captioning, video relay service, and transcription service. I would also like to thank all of our panelists and our moderator for making today's webinar such a great success. In a moment, you're going to see a very short poll appear on your screen. If you could please take a moment to answer a couple of questions about today's event before leaving the webinar, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you and have a fabulous day.
Thank you, everyone. Then we're okay to let our panelists go, right?
Hey guys, that was a great job.
Yep, it's all good. We got and I noticed I put pool instead of poll on that, so that's my fault, guys. Sorry, I'm gonna go through and make sure that's not the case for the next 3 days.
Well, it is the first day of June, Ryan, so that's okay.
Awesome job, guys. It was so good. You did
Yeah,
such
you did so well, you guys. Seriously.
Ah,
You
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
job, Keenan and Jess. You killed it.